So I thought I would start with the two questions I'm asked the most. They are, have you always wanted to be a writer? And how long did it take you to write this book? So the answers are no and I don't know. So you might wonder how this book came to be, and if you read the dedication in the front, you will see I dedicated to my best friend, Toddy. What happened was we both liked to write. I had an idea about 10 years ago about something I wanted to write. So she somehow prompted me, and I wrote a chapter, and she said, oh, this is great, write some more. So I wrote some more. I cannot tell you how long it took me to write this book because I didn't know I was writing a book. So I know that I started, I don't know when I started. I know that in the summer I was sitting outside on the patio writing, and I know I was done first part of December. So I'm guessing 6 to 9 months, which is very fast to write a book, especially my books, because the second book took 6 years to write. But truthfully, I wasn't actually writing the whole 6 years. I'll go into that more later. You probably might have noticed that as you're reading the book, there are, I think, 4 chapters before I tell you who this character is. And when I did this to Toddy, she sent back, who is this person? Where's she from? What's she look like? What she's wearing? Where is she going? This is when we realized that we write very differently. In fact, I think I do write quite differently from most writers, because many writers will get the whole story, the whole plot in their minds before they sit down and actually write it. I wrote this first book with no idea where I was going at all, which led to some interesting things. A lot of writers can just show up at their typewriter or their computer and just start writing. And I cannot do that. If I don't have something to say, I just can't write. Oftentimes, I will think about things for a long time, and then when I write, I very rarely edit anything or do it over again. I find now I add things because I have to, because now all these books have to relate to each other, because we're telling a whole saga here of centuries, so I have to oftentimes go back and make sure I'm following what I need to follow so that everything makes sense. So oftentimes I get very stuck. I really like what I've written, but I don't know where to go with it. I'm kind of written into a corner, and if I can't think of how to get out of the corner, I'm just stuck for a while. And, you know, ghosts are supernatural, but this story has to make sense, or it's kind of pointless. So sometimes it takes me a while. Well, if you've not written a book, you might not know that it can cause some very interesting experiences. For example, writing along, I was maybe halfway through, and suddenly my characters started taking over the book and doing things I didn't want them to do. I was shocked and disturbed, deeply disturbed. And I kept saying, no, this is not what I wanted to do. This is not it. And so one day, whining on the phone to Toddy about how this was just awful and they were doing things and how could this even happen? This is crazy. And in unison, we both said, Andrew must die. So that was kind of a funny moment, but it solved a lot of problems. Because Andrew, the really nice guy, had started getting really weird. I created the house based on 3 houses in England that I really love. You can see that on my website. If you go, you'll see pictures and some description of the houses. As I was writing, I was thinking, I wish I was Megan. I would love to do this. I began to realize that a house that's this old has, 6 centuries of people that have lived there, things that happen, artifacts that are there, whatever. So I could write a whole series about the same house and all the people that had lived there. It sort of became an example of if walls could talk. That's why I called it a biography. When I started the second book, which you haven't read yet, I had already put at the back of my first book the chapter for the 13th century. Blithely doing that, thinking, this will prompt people to want to buy the next book. But then I really had written myself in a corner because I had to use that in the next book. I think that's partly why it took me 6 years to write the next book. I had to do a lot of research. I wanted it to be accurate. That was part of it too. But it took a lot of thought and pondering as to how I was going to work this all out, and I learned a lot of lessons about careful what you're doing. So I actually ended up using that chapter as a prologue to the next book. And then I started with chapter 1. This was the only way I could figure out how to sort of do what I said I was doing. But there was a certain way I wanted to start the next chapter. That worked out pretty well, and then I had an epilogue at the end, and so it's kind of balanced that way. The 13th century is the foundation of the property where Fettigrew Hall is built. There was no house there at the time, there was a castle built. The story of a young woman who's left at the castle and the property when her father and her uncle and all the able-bodied men go to the Crusades. And she's left with an awful lot of responsibility. And it solves the question of why no one was at the castle when the Crusaders came home, which was part of what Millicent wrote in the book. And it offers some new mysteries and solves some mysteries. It also introduces a new ghost named Oren, who will be in this next book I'm writing, and he's probably going to show up in other stories too. One of the things that I learned in writing a novel was that you get a lot of choices about how you want to tell your reader something. And that was kind of a surprise to me, because I read a lot, but I never did think until now about how authors do that. So I realized you could have somebody have a dream, they could have a conversation, they could remember something, they could read it. So there's a lot of tricks to how you want to just impart that information to the reader. I thought I would read to you an excerpt from the book I'm working on now, which is a continuation of Men in Gray, which is not what I ever planned to write, except so many people wanted to know what happens to them next. I've been forced to do so. This is from chapter 4. As Megan awoke from a deep sleep, she wondered what had awakened her. The house was silent. Both Tabby and Twinkle were sleeping at the foot of the bed. She listened, but still nothing. Maybe it was something that she'd been dreaming, but nothing came to mind. She couldn't remember. She lay on her back, trying to relax, and returned to sleep. Very slowly, she began to feel as though a weight was sitting on her chest. Could it be heartburn? As she tried to ignore it, it quickly became serious pressure, pressing down the length of her body, pressing her into the bed until she couldn't breathe. She couldn't move, and she screamed. The dog Tabby had started to howl in fright. Twinkle was growling. And then it ended as fast as it had started. There was nothing there and no sound. The full moon shone brightly behind the curtains. It was 3 a.m. As her terror began to fade, she thought she must have been dreaming, even though it felt so real. Both animals were also awake, so had they awakened because she had, or had they witnessed something in her room? Now she wasn't sure what had happened. Megan quickly turned on the light, panting to breathe and terrified. There was nothing there and no sound. With that shot of adrenaline, Megan did not think she could go back to sleep. She went to the window and looked up at the moon. It was so still. No wind, no sounds. As she looked down to the yard below, she saw a movement. There was someone walking away from the back of the house. A man, she would guess, by his gait. Then she thought it looked like Jamie. She was more curious than scared. What was going on? She started to open the window and call, but then thought better of it. That might not be the wisest thing to do. She was sure the whole house was secure, as she had checked the windows and doors before retiring. This was something discussed with Gray in the morning. I hope that wedded year happens to you. I would like to tell you something kind of exciting to me. Toddy and I have decided that we're going to collaborate on a couple of books. She wants to write about a female Jack the Ripper. And we're going to have a crossover between the two books. My friend Toddy, who's also in the book, will be involved in the detective work of this Ripper, and she'll also be coming to Fettigrew Hall. And we will go back and forth in our books with each other. So that's kind of exciting. I might lose my mind, too. We'll give it a try. I wanted to let you know that I have a sheet here. If you want to put your name and email address on it, I can send you my blog or let you know when the next book is out or whatever you you want to know about. I love history, and I really love to gently educate my readers. I'd like you to be able to say, I never knew that, when you finish reading something I've written. But mostly I just want you to find humor and pathos and adventure, and I want you to say, I'm sorry, it's over, when you finish reading it. Thank you so much. I'm open for questions. I know you have a question, right? You've been saving yours. Tell me your question.
Well, you, in your introductory remarks, were saying that there were 3 places in England that you saw that you put together in your mind, Fettigrew Hall. And so I was wondering, how often have you gone to England? How did you happen on these houses? Did you get to go inside? Did they have the history of 13th century? I've just been to England.
A couple did.
So it's like I'm intrigued.
It's mostly based on Little Morton Hall, which is not that old. Yeah, I've been to England 6 times, and I'm going in May. I am very privileged to be able to go back because I was just there this past summer. But I got an offer I couldn't resist and had enough points on my credit card, so I'm going. But I guess, I don't know, I'm just crazy about architecture and history, so.
Where in England, I'm curious.
Where is Fettigrew Hall, or where are these houses?
Where are these houses that gave you the imagery?
They're pretty much central England, north of London, kind of in the central part. Little Morton Hall, Scotney Castle, which really is very ancient, and the other one starts with an S too. But you can see pictures of them on the website if you go. There's, I think it's under About the House. It will show you the things that inspired me. And Little Morton Hall looks a little bit like what I described. It's just kind of a pile of, it's like they got a whim and they put another room there, and then they put another one, that kind of thing. I don't know. I just made it all up.
Your characters dominate the questions. Your characters, they, in kind of the evolution of writing the book, started doing things on their own. Do you kind of a writer myself, but I've never had that experience because it's all me writing my own experience. I've never written another character that starts taking on their own life. What would happen if you let them have the freedom?
I did. I decided that if I was shocked, so would be the readers. I didn't know what else to do. That's not unusual. I have found since then that it happens fairly frequently to fiction writers. That was really a surprise.
I kept thinking, especially with all the history involved in this too, how to keep everything straight. Do you remember what you wrote before? And I can't imagine.
No, I don't. I use OneNote. The Microsoft program. And so, yeah, I had a lot of problems on the second book, trying to keep everything straight and kind of a storyline. But I don't do outlines very well, and I don't do storyboards, and I tried all kinds of different things. Finally, what I did was take every character, which includes things like the rooms and the house itself and the yard and that kind of thing, plus all the people. I plugged everything I had written about them into a page, so I can go back and see what did I say about that guy, what's he look like, or whatever, or how old was he, whatever I need to know.
I wonder it took you 6 years because of all that you have to remember.
That's part of it. I had to kind of get straight in my head where I was going with it, and even when I wrote Fettigrew Hall, I got to a point where I couldn't go on with the story until I mapped out the house. And that's why I did the maps of the house and the yard, because I had to have straight in my head, if I was talking about somebody walking down the hall or going to this room or whatever, I had to know where they were going. It kind of surprised me I had to do that too. But
where did the name come from?
It came from Fettigrew and Fettigrew, which are both common English names, and I combined them hoping it sounded English. I looked on Google to see if there was such a name, and there isn't, which makes it go higher in the ratings, because anytime they Google it, they find my book.
Yeah.
So,
I thought it was fun reading I read both books.
yeah.
So I read the first one when I was in Honduras. I started reading and I started laughing because I know you. So I was reading the book in your voice. I could hear you in everything that was written there. So that was interesting for me to know you and then read the book. And I'm like, oh, Anne's right here. And I told Terry that while I was reading.
Oh, good. That makes me feel good.
So then I was like, God, I should have brought the second book. Totally different time frames and different characters.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, do you have a favorite out of the two?
A favorite book?
Yes. Do you like one better than the other? Do you have a different experience with one over the other?
Yeah, the second one was agony.
Did your characters take up on you on the second one?
No, they didn't actually. They didn't.
I enjoyed them both, but I really liked the second one too because I didn't hear your voice as much in the second one as I did in the first one, and I don't know.
Because I didn't live in the 13th century.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
I think the 13th century is better written, but I'm still proud of Fettigrew Hall. I like the way that I did some plot twists and things like that. I was trying, it became really a challenge because you don't want to give away anything too soon. And you want to keep people moving forward, but you don't want to give it away. And that was kind of challenging, but I think now I got a better idea of how to do that. 12th century isn't much of a mystery, really. I mean, it does solve the mystery of why no one was at the castle. But it doesn't really create much of a mystery, I don't think.
I'm halfway into the second one.
Yeah.
And it's more, a lot of history
Yeah,
in
there's
there.
there's a lot
That's
of
what I was
research.
thinking about reading. Oh my gosh, you must have had to do so much.
Well, I love to do
Yes.
research, but I really did try very hard to be accurate.
And the first one is more of a mystery,
It is.
and you're wondering, and you're like, you've got
Right.
the ghosts, and you've got the people, and you're trying to figure
Right.
out, who's doing what.
Yeah.
But the 13th century is more, you're learning that lifestyle
Yeah.
and
That's what I'm
the
learning.
differences in culture between what we do today and what they were doing then.
Yeah.
And whether that's clothing or food or how they're, the jobs
Right.
to stay alive. And, in some ways it seems very simple compared to what we're doing now, but they worked all day.
Yeah, and a lot of people have, shall we say, questioned the ending of the second book. But my answer is, it was ugly. The 13th century was not a nice time. And that's what I was trying to impart.
Yeah, I was wondering one thing about the second book especially.
Yeah.
How much time did you spend doing research versus actually writing? There's an awful lot of depth into the history of it. I know you're a big Anglophile, but how much time do you actually spend digging into that?
Well, certain things I had to do a lot of research, like how they trained knights. In order to be able to talk about those characters and how they were being trained, I had to go read all about that and figure out what I was going to say about it. So I don't know the answer to that question, really. I agonized so long trying to write it. I don't know.
Okay, so the next book you're going to go back to the first
Megan and Gray.
Do you have outlines for where you want to take it after that, or just ideas of?
I have some ideas of some books I really do want to write, and I'm still trying to decide. But one that is really calling to me is, if you remember what Millicent wrote about Thomas Fettigrew, he was a manufacturer, not a lord, and he rose up through society by making a lot of money. So I want him to be a character who's just a total buffoon. I want everything out of his mouth to be the wrong words, just sort of like the malaprops and what are the other words for those? Anyway, I really want to do that. That really calls to me. I want to write a Victorian one. I want to write a Tudor one. The house was really built in the Tudor times, so that kind of needs to be written.
Your descriptions of the rooms, I felt like I was there. Edifice on the fireplace, or the carvings.
Well, it all comes from stuff I've seen.
Yeah.
A lot of it was in Little Morton Hall.
Felt I was there, and I appreciated
Well, that's
it in your
good.
writing.
I'm glad to hear that. I would also like to write some books about the characters. Like, I'd like to write a Godfrey book. I know specifically what the deal with him is, and I'd like to live long enough to write that. At the rate I'm going, I don't know though. You remember in Millicent's book, I think his name was Richard Dubois. who had a crazy wife, Mary, who was in the back room screaming and crazy. I want to write her story. Hey, Terry, were you there when I read that story about her sneaking down to the crypt to get her dead baby?
I don't believe so.
Oh, okay. I read that at our publishing. That belongs in that book. And so that, to answer your question, that's kind of every once in a while I'll get an idea and I'll go, oh, that'd be good for this book. And I go and I write it and I stick it in that information. So.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you, if you were keeping track of those things.
Yeah.
Or if you could write portions of the book simultaneously just because you get ideas.
I am doing that. I'm also writing some other books. Writing a book that has evolved, and I'm still working on this, but it's basically some of the favorite places I've been to in England, with a lot more in-depth information about them than you would get when you walk in the door and they hand you this pamphlet. So that's nonfiction. Also, I want to put together a book that is my blog, because I've been very proud of those. I think that it would make a good nonfiction, just kind of short book that you can read little chapters. But I'm still struggling with that because in my blog I have a lot of links. So it's not going to make a good printed book. I think it would be better as an ebook. And then if you want to click on a link to go get more information or whatever. I've done probably maybe a third of that book. No, not that book, the other book, the Favorite Places book. So maybe I'll get some more favorite places this summer. Now I just don't have enough time to write all the things I want to write. And I'm going to have to pick up my consider.
And how are you finding self-publishing? I know, what are you finding in that area?
It has completely changed since I published the first book. Totally different. And it was published really before all these other companies started coming out with print on demand. Selling a book is nearly impossible. So I just figure I write because I want to. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Everybody
so
good?
much.
Thank you.